Welcome to Peds Doc Talk TV. I am Dr. Mona Amin, a board-certified pediatrician and mom, and I'm going to be talking all about when you can take your newborn outside and when they can meet friends and family. Before we begin, make sure to share this episode with anyone you know who's expecting a baby, or if they have a baby in that fourth trimester. Make sure you hit subscribe so you can stay up to date on all of my content here at Peds Doc Talk TV. And here we go. First of all, congratulations. I'm sure you're so excited to welcome that new baby into the world. It seems like a very chaotic time with the pandemic, but I hope after this episode you feel a little bit more reassured on when you can take that baby out, when you can have family members come by, because we all know that socialization is really important and that we want everyone to see our baby, but we want to do it in the safest way possible. So I'm going to be going over common questions I get asked in my office, but also questions that I've gotten asked on my Instagram at Peds Doc Talk, so make sure you follow me there too. So what age is a newborn? A newborn is any baby under 2 months of age. So why do we care so much about babies who are under 2 months of age in regards to infection? Is it that they turn 2 months of age and all of a sudden their immune system is amazing and they can be around everyone they want? Not exactly. But of course, younger babies under 2 months, their immune system is much more immature. They have not been exposed to the pathogens and the microbes of an older child yet, and we don't want them to get sick with really bad illnesses. It has a lot to do also with the blood-brain barrier. This is a barrier that helps keep things in the blood or in the body away from the brain. So in little babies, for example, under 1 month of age, if they get a fever, we're going to want to do a workup to make sure, well, where is this infection coming from? Is it a virus, or is it something that's bacterial that needs antibiotics? And of course, is it something that's going towards the brain? So if your baby does get exposed to an illness, and how do we get exposed to illnesses? From other people, we know this in the pandemic, we're going to want to know, well, where is this infection coming from? And with that, it's going to mean a workup that's warranted to make sure that baby's okay. So I did a Fever 101 video, which I'm linking right here. It is a really important watch for anyone who's a parent or a caregiver. But I didn't talk about fevers in a newborn in more detail. I said, hey, under 2 months of age, you need to let your clinician know, but I want to break it down for newborns. So typically in the United States, if your baby under 1 month of age has a fever over 100.4 taken rectally, you're going to need to go to the emergency room. So what does this look like? Your child is not feeding well, your baby is super fussy, feels warm to you, sweaty. I want you to take a temperature, and you're going to want to take that rectally. On the other video, the Fever 101 video, I go over how to take a rectal temp. It is the most accurate way to take a temperature. You check a reading, it's 100.2. I want you to check that temperature again in 20-30 minutes after you take off the baby's clothes, just put them in the diaper and check it again. If it's over 100.4 and your child is under 30 days old, you need to take that child in to be evaluated immediately. It means packing things up and going to the hospital so that they can do an evaluation. What does this evaluation look like for your baby who's under 1 month? It can look like a CBC, which checks for infection. It can look like a urinalysis, which checks for a urinary infection. It can look like blood cultures to make sure there's no infection in the blood. And it can also look like a lumbar puncture, which is a procedure that takes spinal fluid to make sure that there's no infection in the brain. Babies this young are going to have to be observed for at least 48 hours until all those cultures and workup come back normal. We want to make sure, well, is this something that needs antibiotic, or was it just a virus? And unfortunately, we can't just go by, well, mom was sick with a cold. If a baby under 1 month has a fever, we have to make sure that that illness is not related to a bacterial process and make sure we get the evaluation and workup and treatment that's necessary. So if your child is between 30 and 60 days old, and has a fever over 100.4 taken rectally, it's important to let your child's clinician know. They're going to probably do a limited workup. They may not need the lumbar puncture, but at the very least, they'll probably check a CBC, they'll probably check a urinalysis, and they'll probably check a blood culture, depending on how the child's looking. Based on that, they may decide to check a lumbar puncture or send you to the ER. So my personal opinion is that if your child is under 1 month of age and has a fever that's confirmed rectally, you need to go to the ER. Between 1 and 2 months, you can call your child's clinician, but if for any reason they're not answering, if for any reason they're closed, then I would recommend evaluation in an emergency room setting. Between 2 months and 3 months, the recommendation is that, hey, if this is your first fever, run it by your child's clinician. They're going to want to make sure, how are they feeding? Are they making wet diapers? How are they acting? But they may not need a full workup. But it's important to just run it by them because it likely will be your baby's first fever. So a common question I got asked on my Instagram was, well, when is their immune system ready to go? And it's not a magic age, right? It has a lot to do with the fact that, hey, as they get older, their immune system will be stronger. They'll likely fight off infections a little bit quicker in terms of, for example, a common cold. But it's not that easy for us to say, well, this is the age that everything gets better and that if they get an illness, they'll be able to fight it quicker. We just don't know. But what we do know is that exposure to other people can lead to infection. It doesn't mean an automatic infection. It just means, hey, a lot of people getting together can put someone at risk, not even just newborns, but adults. So when I discuss avoiding certain activities, the reason is twofold. One, I don't want your newborns getting sick if we can avoid it. Obviously, you can't control everything, but we're trying to reduce risk as much as possible. And part of that risk reduction is avoiding a lot of people, crowds of people, things like that, if we can. The other reason is that if your newborn does get sick with a fever, that's going to require a workup. Under 1 month of age, like I mentioned, it's a pretty intense workup. That's necessary. Between 1 month and 2 months, it's a little bit less of a workup, but still valid and important. So even though you tell us, hey, it's a cold because so-and-so got a cold, if your newborn has a fever under 2 months of age, we're going to need to evaluate that child because it's in the best interest of that child. And again, it doesn't mean that as I go through all these activities, it means that you can't do any of it or that you have to abide by what I say 100%, but we have to remember that it's about risk reduction and benefit and risk. Is the benefit of that activity needed? Do I have an alternative? Can I leave my baby at home with someone else while I run an errand with an older sibling? All of these things are things I'm going to go over because it's important in this discussion when we talk about risks for newborns. Another question I got is, well, my child got the 2-month vaccine, so that's why now we can be around other people. These vaccines are so important, but one vaccine does not give you full immunity. You're still susceptible to the illness that you're getting vaccinated for. That's why it's so important that everyone vaccinates, because it creates herd immunity and it also protects people who may not be eligible to get vaccines or babies who may be too young to be fully vaccinated for an illness. An example is the DTaP vaccine, which is diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. The pertussis component is what's really important for babies, and when you get one round of vaccines at 2 months, you're about 50% immune, but you still can get pertussis if you're exposed because you're not fully vaccinated against it until you get all of your boosters. So that's why it's important that other people are vaccinated, like caregivers, against pertussis, which is the Tdap vaccines for grown-ups. And that's why it's important to also understand that just because your child got a vaccine does not make them immune to all of those illnesses. It just makes them less susceptible to them. And it's also important to know who you're getting in touch with, know who's visiting you, right? If someone's sick, if someone is not vaccinating, you need to have a conversation with them about their choices and what you want as well. So when can I do X, Y, and Z activity? Well, similar to COVID, the idea here is risk reduction. We want to look at doing activities with the lowest risk possible if we're going to be with other people. Obviously, not seeing anyone at all is going to be the best in terms of risk reduction, but if you want to have people over, or if you want to see other people or take your baby out, you want to know, well, what is the best way to do this, or is it even worth it at all? So to illustrate an example, let's discuss travel. This is a common question I get asked, and more particularly airline travel. So I recommend waiting until 2 months of age for all of the reasons I mentioned above. I want them to be a little bit older so that we don't have to do the big bad workup if they get a fever. I'm trying to protect them from getting illnesses. Of course, it doesn't mean that you go on a plane and all of a sudden you get sick, but there are more points of contact, right? Through the airport, you're running into other people, you have to go through baggage claim, you're on an airplane, and also on your destination, you're going to see a lot of other human beings that can transmit illnesses. So that's why I use the 2-month rule. Now, for many families, they have to travel before 2 months. You're moving, maybe you adopted a baby and you have to travel back with them. That's fine. If it's a necessity, we do it. The benefit is there. But when we're looking at, well, is this a trip that needs to happen? Maybe if it's one that can be postponed, you wait until the child's over 2 months of age. If it has to happen, that is okay. No one should pass judgment because it's a necessity. And again, we're looking at benefit and risk in all of these situations. In regards to international travel, same concept. When you are internationally traveling, you are going to be going to another place. They may have different illnesses there. With COVID right now, I want you to remember that you want to follow guidelines from the CDC and also from the countries that you're traveling to. So if those countries have testing requirements or other requirements, you're going to want to watch that. An example I gave at the start of this pandemic when planning international travel, you have to be okay in a pandemic that if for any reason recommendations change, you have to be able to roll with the punches. I don't imagine any countries are going to close borders, but that happened at the beginning of the pandemic. But just say you leave to go to another country, and then now the United States is not allowing people from that country to come back in because of the pandemic, you have to be okay with that. So always remember that when you're traveling in general, but especially with a newborn. What about walks? You are absolutely okay to go on walks as soon as you're comfortable doing it. A walk is a very low risk activity for me. Obviously, if you're in a crowded New York City street, then maybe that's a lot of exposure. But going for a walk is important for the parent, the caregiver, and also for baby to just get outside during the day hours. So what about grocery shopping? So remember, this is an essential need. You need to get food, you need to get essentials. So it's something that needs to happen. If it's an essential need and you don't have anyone to take care of that newborn, then you have to take the baby. I had to do this sometimes too. I had to take Ryan to the grocery store because my husband was working and we didn't have a nanny, so I had to take him, and that's okay. One of the best ways to reduce risk is holding baby in a carrier. It also makes it easier to go around with your grocery cart where you're not having to push a stroller too. So in a carrier was how I did it. It was very, very useful, and then I would be able to do my shopping. Avoid having strangers come to your baby, and I'll go through that in the end on how to politely say, hey, I don't want you to touch my baby or come near. You don't need those people to come and kiss them and touch them. If you want to have a conversation with someone at a safe distance, 6 feet using COVID rules, that's fine. But you don't need random strangers in your newborn's face because we don't know where they are, we don't know the germs that they have, and we don't want to expose your newborn to those things. So what about churches or places of worship? Now, because we're in a pandemic, I think people have been educated about, well, what is considered high risk, low risk. Churches are considered a little high risk for infection spread because they are enclosed, likely with poor air circulation, and there's a lot of people usually in one spot. So my advice with a newborn is to wait until that child's a little bit older than 2 months. If you must go, keep them close to you like you would with grocery shopping. Maybe not having a lot of people come up to you and the baby. That's going to be really hard, which is why I say wait if you can, because anyone at a place of worship usually wants to see babies, and babies are nice to look at, and we want to congratulate you. They're going to want to come up to you, and we just don't know where they've been. We don't know the germs that they have. So it's important to kind of understand that, but that is the decision you and your partner or you yourself can make. What about weddings? Big question I've been getting asked. Remember, we're in a pandemic, so use your judgment based on that. That's a lot of people getting together. Weddings are also one of those things that I recommend waiting until the child's older. Now, a lot of people have babies and then they're in a bridal party. Maybe your sibling's getting married. You have to decide, well, what do you want to do in that situation? If you must bring the baby, I really would advise having someone, whether it's a nanny or a grandma or you, leaving with the baby so that you're not in that enclosed space for a long period of time. You can just basically do the quick pictures with the family and then go. There's no reason that the baby needs to be around so many other people, and especially in a pandemic. So use your judgment, but remember, those activities like a wedding or party or churches or places of worship, there's a lot of people in an enclosed space. Usually they're happy and screaming and yelling and singing. That's just a lot of germs that can come in our way. It doesn't mean that you're going to get sick, that your newborn will get sick. This all has to do with the risk, and we're trying to reduce risk as much as possible. So the next thing I want to go over is, well, what about siblings? A common question, well, do I leave my newborn at home? You leave your newborn at home if you have an option to leave your newborn at home. But to be honest, not everyone does. And I don't want us to judge parents who do not have that option, because we got to do what we have to do. So if you need to drop off your older sibling to daycare, you have to take your newborn with you. Where are they going to stay? They can't stay at home without anyone, so they're coming with you. So this is really important, that we understand that we are doing the best we can with the information and resources we have. But if we have to take our newborn, we take our newborn. I don't want you to feel like, again, that if I take my newborn out, that they're going to get sick. This is, again, about risk reduction. And if we have to take our newborn out, we take them out. We have to drop off our older sibling to the daycare. That's fine. We have to go to the grocery store. That's fine. Perhaps keeping them close, avoiding a lot of other people that may be coming close to that newborn is a way that you can reduce risk. The other question is, well, if I have a newborn, can my older child stay in daycare or school? Well, obviously, you need someone to take care of that kid. I do not recommend pulling children out. Of course, talk to your child's clinician if there's any other guidance based on the medical history of your newborn. But a great tip would be teaching that child how to kiss the newborn on their feet. Make it fun for them. Have that be their special spot that they kiss the baby. So when they come home, I know they're going to want to touch baby's face and kiss baby. But say, no, 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 Ryan, we're going to kiss baby's feet. That is your special way of showing love for your baby brother or sister. And that way they feel like it's a little bit special, and that way they're keeping germs out of the face. And remember, how do we mainly get sick? We mainly get sick through exposure of illnesses and germs through our mucous membrane, so the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and also putting our hands in our mouth after we've touched a germy substance. So by teaching your older child to touch or kiss the feet of the baby, that's a better way to reduce risk of exposure to germs. But don't pull your child out if that's something that is really good for that child. I think childcare is really important. It's obviously great for that older sibling, and we don't want to rock their situation or their routine too much when they already have a new sibling in the house. So I talked about leaving the house with the newborn. You obviously are going to go to doctor's appointments, you're going to go for walks, if you have to run an errand, you have to run an errand, but avoid crowded places with poor air circulation. But now what about allowing people into your home? I'm going to talk about COVID at the end, but these guidelines are basically for any newborn, even if we weren't in a pandemic. So my first rule with visitors is you need to talk to your partner, if you have one, on what you want with visitors. What are your rules? Some parents don't want visitors, and that should be okay. You need to decide who you want to visit and if you want them to visit at all. This is really important because I find sometimes that parents become overwhelmed with the amount of visitors and they are afraid to say no because they don't want people to feel bad. I'm sorry, you have to set the rules that are important for you. If you don't want a visitor because it's COVID, if you don't want a visitor because you just don't want them, you don't feel good, you want to have, the ability to just be comfortable and not have to entertain guests, you need to decide what's most comfortable for you and run with that. So I also like to prioritize visitors who are helpful to you or helpful to the baby. You need to heal if you've just had a baby. So it's important to set those boundaries and say, okay, I'm going to only have visitors who may be able to help me. And that's not selfish, that's sustainability. That's how we're going to get through those postpartum days. Pre-COVID recommendations for visitors would have been any visitors that you see fit can come in. Anyone who's sick should stay home, and that should be something that should be said to that visitor. Hey, if anyone's sick or under the weather, you need to stay home. A common question I get asked is, well, do visitors need to be up to date on their Tdap or flu vaccines? This is up to you. I need and recommend all primary caregivers have their Tdap vaccine and flu vaccine. Primary caregivers are you, your partner, a nanny, maybe grandma who's staying with you for 3 months. To me, that's most important because that person is around your child on a regular basis. And again, your baby's too young to get the DTaP vaccine until 2 months of age, and they're too young to get the flu vaccine until 6 months. In regards to visitors, that is up to you and what you decide. If they are coming and they are doing proper hygiene, if they're well, you don't necessarily have to have them vaccinated, but that is a decision you and your partner have to make. So during COVID times, the recommendations change a little bit, especially with masking. So I do recommend masking if you're going to be in an indoor setting because that's a closed setting where COVID is more likely to be risky. So if you're having visitors, keep the group small, right? Not a lot of people. And I would mask all the adults. Obviously, you're not masking anyone under 2, but mask all the adults and any child over 2 that's able to keep that mask on to reduce risk as much as possible. Outdoor meetups are still a great idea, weather permitting. So this is in the driveway of your home, in a park. These are ways because we know COVID is less likely to transmit outdoors in open spaces. So that's an option if you want to do a meet and greet. So now what if all of the adults are vaccinated against COVID? In that situation, then you can get together unmasked. But remember, it doesn't mean 0 chance of spread. It just means much reduced spread. So the number one thing we can do to help prevent our babies, newborns, whoever from getting COVID is all the adults getting vaccinated when it's your chance. Why? Is that the more adults that get vaccinated, the less this is going to spread. I also would not allow visitors who are sick or under the weather. This goes for pre-pandemic and also in a pandemic. It's just not needed. That person can get better, and once they're all better, they can come see the baby. That baby's not going anywhere. That baby will be older, and there's going to be plenty of meetups after. Another thing that can help if you're sick is masking yourself when you're feeding the baby, so when you're really close to the baby, just to reduce spread of any illness. This goes for things like the flu, things like COVID, things like a common cold. This is just one thing that you can think of doing to help reduce spread when you are sick as a primary caregiver. And of course, regular hand washing. This is a no-brainer. This is something that we were reminded of in this pandemic, but regular hand washing can really help reduce the spread of any illnesses. So before you're handling baby, before you eat, before you breastfeed, before you give a bottle, I want you to make sure you are washing your hands with soap and water, because that can really help reduce spread of COVID and also other illnesses. Now, the last thing I want to go over is how to tell people not to touch your baby. There are many ways, and it really comes down to your style. So some people are going to be more direct. Don't touch my baby. Some people are not that confrontational. So I'm going to just go over some tips, and in the comment section you can ask how you have told people not to touch your baby. And this really goes to strangers that you may see outside at the grocery store or at any store. Number one, say it directly. Please don't touch him or her. That's it. Done. You don't need to say why. You just say direct, please don't touch him. And they can decide how they feel about that. Another tip is putting a sign on your stroller. This is something that can say, I'm a little baby, or I'm a newborn, please look but don't touch. You can do something like that if you don't want to verbally tell so many people to stop touching your baby. Maybe doing that if you're going to be going into a place of worship, for example, or to a wedding where people are going to be coming up to that baby. If you decide to go to those places, you can do a sign if you feel comfortable doing that. You can also use the current climate in a pandemic as a reason. You know, with everything that's going on, it means so much that you want to kiss my baby or come close, but it would mean so much if you can just keep some distance. Easy as that. You don't have to be rude about it, but you're just being firm on your desires. The last thing, which is a method that I talk to my families a lot, is you can blame the doctor. So if you have trouble setting boundaries with a family member, or you don't want a visitor, you can say, hey, my child's clinician is not comfortable with having visitors, or my child's clinician said that this is not the right time. It's okay to do that. The most important thing, if you're pregnant and about to have that baby, you need to talk to your partner, if you have one, on what your rules are. What are going to be the rules for visitors? Are we going to mask because we're in a pandemic if no one has the vaccine? What are the rules that you want for you and your baby? As a mom myself, remember that your desires may change. Before I had Ryan, I said I would not want a lot of visitors, and then after I was like, yes, please, everyone come. So this was before the pandemic. So it's really important to recognize that things may change, your boundaries may change, but remember what you want before going into it. I hope this was helpful. Make sure you ask any questions in the comment section below. Share it with a friend who also may be expecting a baby, and also if anyone has a newborn under 2 months of age, if they're feeling worried about exposure and where they can go and what they can do with their newborn. And make sure you hit that subscribe button, because that's how you're going to stay up to date on all of my Peds Doc Talk TV content. Subscribe to my podcast, the Peds Doc Talk podcast, and I'll see you next week.